Welcome back, Spokane, to another episode of EvoReal Talks. I'm Matt Side.
I'm Jessica Side.
And we are here in Studio D. We haven't talked about our Studio D for a while.
Still in Studio D. That is true.
I decided to wear my flannel today because it is bleeping cold outside.
It is really cold outside. I'm actually wearing a wool sweater. This is a very thin wool sweater, but it's wool nonetheless. I will admit it's a little scratchy, but it's worth
warm.
it for warmth, for sure.
It is cold. Mm-hmm. It was colder yesterday on Friday.
Okay.
The kids were supposed to have a downhill ski trip at Schweitzer as one of their field trips on Friday. Mm-hmm. And I'll just tell you this. Pioneer School pretty much doesn't cancel anything for any reason.
That is true.
So when
doesn't mean we go, but...
So when Betty said, no skiing on Friday, we knew it was going to be bad. And Benson came home. He's like, Betty canceled skiing because the high was going to be in the negatives.
In the negatives.
I think the wind chill is anticipated to be negative 40.
Yes, I heard that.
That's pretty cool.
On the mountain. It sounds miserable is what it sounds
It's pretty
like.
intense. I believe that you will get frostbite within 10 minutes for exposed skin at those wind chill levels. So cover up. I think I've got a short little list here of some tips for sub-freezing
All right.
temperatures.
I'm listening.
Many of you don't know, but as a little kid, I grew up in eastern Montana, and this ain't nothing cold what we're getting here in Spokane.
Okay, all right.
We would literally walk to school in 20 below zero temperatures.
Okay, whatever.
That's just. So I have these memories of walking to school truly bundled, like Michelin Man bundled up, scarves and like.
Yes.
I'm surprised we didn't have ski goggles. So, I thought I would just drop a little cold weather intel.
Give it to us.
First of all, don't wash your car when it's 3 degrees outside.
Yeah, that's not
just
a good
silly.
idea.
That's a bad idea.
Like, you mean don't take it to a car wash place?
Don't take it to a car wash. Another thing that many of you don't know is that I assist in managing a car wash up in Kalispell, Montana, and we did on whatever it was, Tuesday or Thursday, have a review from somebody who said, I put soap all over my car and it's frozen and I can't get it off. And I was like, what is going on? And I looked at the temperature in Kalispell and it was literally 3 degrees. And can I just say, don't put soap on your car when it's 3 degrees. What do you think it's going to do?
So is that on your list? Because that seems like a real
literally
dumb thing
on
to
my
be
list.
on the list.
Don't wash the car when it's 3 degrees.
Okay,
There
all
are
right.
people,
What else do you have on your list?
There are people in the community that need to know these things.
Okay, all right. Don't do it.
Okay. So if your car is not in a garage and we get down into the single or below zero temperatures, it can be very challenging to start your car because everything is so cold.
Okay.
So here's a cold weather tip from eastern Montana.
All right.
My dad used to put a heat lamp under the oil pan, so the oil pan is right below your engine. So he would fasten the bulb of the heat lamp up to the bottom so that it was pointing up and plug it in overnight, and it would keep the engine warm enough that it would start up.
And that's not dangerous or anything?
No, it's not.
I'm just checking. I don't want someone doing it and then a car blows up or something.
I mean, don't stick a blowtorch in your engine to warm it up. That might be dangerous.
All right.
But,
what else you got?
let's see here. We talked about protecting your skin when it's really cold. The wind chill is the biggest issue with that, right? When it's cold.
Which doesn't seem real windy right now.
No, it doesn't. I think it
even a little bit of wind out there, though, is so cold.
It drops it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Breathe through your nose, not your mouth.
Okay.
So, and this is not when it's like 15 degrees outside. I mean, it's not that cold. But if it's in 1, 2, or negative numbers, here's the air warms when going through your nose before it gets to your lungs. So if you're going for a run, which you probably shouldn't do in that kind of weather, you need to keep something in front of your face to warm that air up. Otherwise, it can actually cause lung damage. And then, the most important thing, don't lick a flagpole.
Okay. Wow, I did not know that we were going to be covering this today. And here's what I will say is I just hope that I don't actually have to take any of this advice because I hope it warms up very quickly and I won't have to worry about putting a heat lamp under the oil pan.
Hey, you don't need to because my truck has a core heater, so I can plug my truck in.
Okay, what about my vehicle? You're just going to ignore my vehicle?
Yeah, we'll just take my car if it's that cool.
That's fine.
I will say this, that with the wind, because, again, you've got temperatures and then you've got wind. Again, in eastern Montana, my dad did get frostbite on his eye from just the wind.
What?
Yeah, because they were like 80 and 90 mile an hour gusts up on the mountain where he was working. And
I don't want to know these kinds of things.
Well,
it's disgusting.
It just cover your eyes if it's really windy out there, or close them.
Sheesh.
Wear ski goggles.
Can I tell you one story?
Sure, we're in a storytelling mood.
Just
obviously.
really quickly, and then I promise, we will get to some other stuff. But I just want to say that when I was in 6th grade, I wrote a story, and it got me into the young writers. You know, like you did that. Like
I know.
You did a really good story. You got into the young writers thing.
I was a young writer.
Yeah. Well, it was called The Great Tongue Ripoff. And it was about a bunch of kids who put their tongues on the fence at school and got stuck. And
did it actually happen?
No.
It sounded like maybe a bunch of kids at recess.
No, but I was pretty proud of it, and my teacher loved it.
Well, I mean, just the title would have caught me. The Great Tongue Ripoff.
That's
it
right.
sounds like a kid book that I would have read back then.
Yeah, exactly. It was
like
very
an
good.
Amelia Bedelia or whatever they had.
All right, so let's move on.
Do we want to talk real estate, or should we just tell silly stories?
No, I would like to talk about the fact that it is February, and February is Black History Month. And I thought it would be a great thing for us to dig into our own history. Of course, as a nation, we certainly honor and we learn about kind of the big historical figures in our society. But I did some research in Spokane, and I wanted to, over the next couple of weeks, I want to bring up some of those people.
Cool.
So I'm going to read this article because I think it's really good. It covers all the things that I would want it to cover, and we're going to talk about his family next week.
Oh,
so
excellent.
we're going to talk about his granddaughter next week. All right, so this is Peter Barrow. All right, Peter Barrow was born a slave near Pittsburgh, Virginia, in 1840. As a child, he was taken to a plantation in Alabama. Earlier this year, in other words, in 1814, perhaps when Union and Naval Army forces invaded and gained control over the Mobile Bay Area in February, Barrow, now a young man, managed to escape. Fleeing to Vicksburg this week, he enlists in Company A, 66th U.S. Colored Infantry. Barrow serves in the Army for the remainder of the war. Seeing action in Louisiana and Arkansas, like many other former slaves turned soldiers, Barrow's Union Army service does not end until well after the war. On November 1st, 1865, the former slave is appointed as a sergeant in the U.S. Army. By the time of his release from the military in March 1866, Barrow has served 3 years in the Army and is ready to exercise his freedom in society and live a productive life in post-war South. So, settling in Vicksburg and marrying Julia, the Union veteran soon entered politics and is elected to the Mississippi legislature. Easy for me to say.
It's a big word.
One of many Black Americans serving as Republican elected officials during the years of Reconstruction. His service consisted of 2 terms in the Mississippi House of Representatives and 1 term as a senator from the Vicksburg district. Nonetheless, in post-Reconstruction Mississippi, Barrow senses little opportunity to further improve his life and that of his family. As we know, Reconstruction was an amazing time where lots of Black Americans were able to get into lots of places of leadership in government, but it all got shut down. The Ku Klux Klan, lots of groups started to sow fear and kind of took over, and Reconstruction just absolutely broke down. So he realized this was not a good place for him to be anymore. So, thus, in 1889, the Barrows, Peter and his wife, eventually having 6 sons and 1 daughter, which I remember, we're talking about her in 2 weeks, or in next week, moved to Deer Park, Washington, near Spokane, where Peter declared in retrospect, "I jumped out of hell and landed in heaven on both feet." Pretty cool. So just as context, 1889 was the Great Fire in Spokane, so he moved here during that time. And when I say here, I do mean quite a ways north when you think about transportation at that time. In Washington, Barrows re-engages in politics, becoming involved in the Populist Party. In addition, he helps found the John Logan Colored Republican Club. Taking advantage of opportunities afforded him in Washington, Barrows also becomes a businessman, purchasing a large tract of land and founding the Deer Lake Irrigated Orchards Company, a large apple orchard in Stevens County. He employs some 100 black men in his business. His successes in the world of agribusiness enable him to take a leading role in the state's Farmer Alliance movement. Ever entrepreneurial, Barrow also becomes involved in a publishing business, of which The Citizen, a black newspaper, is the legacy of his family. In addition, this guy was just amazing to me. In addition to his involvement in civic life, Barrow is a Baptist minister. Although the date of his ordination is uncertain, in 1890, Barrow becomes one of the founders of the Calvary Baptist Church, Spokane's first black church. In 1892, the Barrow family moves into the city limits of Spokane, and from 1895 to 1906, Peter pastors the Calvary Baptist Church. Sadly, there was a tragic accident, and Reverend Barrow was struck and killed by a streetcar while attending a church convention in Tacoma, and that was in 1906.
Wow.
Yet the life and contributions of the enterprising Baptist were not to be forgotten. On the east side of the Spokesman Review building on North Monroe Street in Spokane are 12 bronze busts honoring the city's early business and community leaders. Among the 12 memorialized is Reverend Peter Barnabas Barrow, identified as pastor, entrepreneur, and a publisher. Born a slave, Peter Barrow is thus remembered for a long list of amazing accomplishments in which few post-war American citizens surpassed. To the present day, the Barrow family name remains inscribed on the cornerstone of the Calvary Baptist Church.
That was a really cool story.
Yeah. I actually wish, you look at this, and I've looked for a little bit more information on him. It doesn't seem like there's a lot. It would just be, like a full book on his life would just be amazing. But I just think it's really worth us just taking the time to recognize Peter Barrow.
Yeah, no, that's, as someone who grew up basically his whole life in the Spokane community, that's
his adult life at least.
Well, I mean, I was born here.
Oh, you? I thought you meant him. I'm like, he wasn't here the whole... Yeah.
And, not knowing anything about this gentleman. I mean, it's obviously part of our history if there's a bust down by the Spokane Review building and such. But that's really cool. And that is a great segue into our featured community this week. We want to talk about Deer Park.
Deer
Park, Washington.
Awesome.
So Deer Park is what we would call a bedroom community of Spokane.
Right. We talked about that.
Didn't you learn about bedroom communities
I didn't
recently?
know what that was until you told me a few months ago, and Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls would be considered bedroom communities
of Spokane. So for those of our listeners that don't know what that means, it means people sleep there because that's where their house is, but then they work in the bigger city.
There you go.
All right, so Deer Park, a rural community right outside of Spokane. So there's about 4,000, just over 4,000 people in the city proper.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you can call it a city if there's only 4,000 people, but city, town, whatever you want to call it.
We'll call it that.
It's one of the most northeastern parts northern parts of Spokane County, so it's right before you cross over into Stevens.
Gotcha.
It's only 22 miles from the Spokane city limits, and it's only 36 miles from downtown Spokane.
All right.
So it's pretty close when you look at it from in the big picture.
Yeah, relatively speaking, absolutely.
So most of the residents that would say they live in Deer Park would live in unincorporated Spokane County around Deer Park.
Okay.
So just because there's only 4,000 people in Deer Park proper, there's quite a few other people around there.
Okay.
We know several people who live up in that area.
Yep.
Our retired bookkeeper, Steve, and his wife live in the Deer Park area. Steve, shout out. Hope all is well. I know his wife was a school teacher up there for a long time. The Deer Park community is that very much that, like a very
community.
tight community.
Absolutely.
My mom actually worked at the Deer Park Hospital for several years when I was a little
because she
kid.
lived in Elk for a little while.
Yeah, we were in Elk, so we wouldn't have considered ourselves part of the Deer Park community because we were part of the Elk community.
Okay.
But another tiny little town, maybe just a post office at this point.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about its history. I was impressed. You found and forwarded to me a website about the history of Deer Park, and it was I was like, holy smokes, this is
I made
lot.
him do the serious lifting on the history this week. I said, here.
I don't feel like it will be quite as good as when you do it.
That's all
right. So the 7 square miles of land in the heart of the traditional homelands of the Spokane Indians. So that was kind of their traditional. I mean, obviously the Native Americans they moved a lot, very nomadic, but that was kind of the heart of their the area that they would have called home. Mm-hmm. It traces really its origins back to the building of the Spokane Falls and Northern Railroad in 1889. That was when it really became a town. The outsiders' first glimpses of the area came when David Thompson passed through, and Thompson, I believe, would be noted for Thompson Falls.
Oh, okay.
Which is up kind of in the Ponderay River area, Clark Fork River, etc.
Okay.
Passed through in 1811 on Northwest Company business. On one of several trips through the broader region, traveling southwest from the Ponderay River to the Spokane House, which we learned months ago was a trading post. It was a fleeting but important trading post established the year before. So this happened right after the Spokane House. That was therefore now a reason why they would cross through this area. Mm-hmm. The well-known trader and cartographer noted in his journal that he stopped for an hour at Bellews Brook, now known as Dragoon Creek. And if you drive north, you will see the signs of Dragoon Creek on Highway 395.
It sounds like it belongs in a D&D game. Sorry.
Dragoon. This and at this point, the history moves into what so much of U.S. history is filled with, which is colonialism, because there's this huge section of our history in the United States and of this part of the state of Washington and northern Idaho.
A little bit of manifest destiny going on.
I mean, basically, many of the Indians living in the South and the West, so the Native Americans, were relocated to reservations following the Stevens Treaty of 1855. Interestingly, the majority of the Spokanes declined to relocate to them. So this is where Chief Gary was trying to continue to create peace in this area, and I think we've talked about doing a little bit more on Chief Gary.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Anyway, so the reality is I just have to read this part here because this kind of stuck out to me as kind of like where this section of the history ended. In 1881, President Rutherford B. Hayes reduced the tribe's original homelands of some 3 million acres from northeast Washington to western Montana.
So that was 3 million that we had allotted to them.
In 1855, I believe, in the Stevens Treaties, 3 million acres had been given them, eastern Washington all the way to western Montana and everything in between.
Okay.
So that was reduced, though, to 159,000 acre reservation along the lower Spokane River, about 15 miles west of Deer Park. Y'all don't need 3 million acres. I mean, come on. It was a gift in the first place.
Oh, boy. That's hard. You know what? History is so hard because there is such good and things that you want to look at and you want to admire certain things, and then mixed with that, there's all this bad. Yeah. It's really, it's hard to do, and it's something that we have to do. To look at it and to be honest about it. And but it's not fun always.
No, it isn't. So that's a whole section of the history of Eastern Washington, period. Then really the transition happened when logging and mining in northeastern Washington, so up in the Colville area, was really big. There was a whole group of investors and names that you'll probably recognize: James Monahan, James Glover, Arthur Newberry, Frank Rockwood Moore, who all said, "Hey, Daniel Chase Corbin, why don't you come on over here and build us a railroad from Spokane to Colville, because I think there's some money in that. And so that was really, the construction began in March of 1889, and they were laying tracks through the spring and summer while most of downtown Spokane sizzled in the fire of
That is correct.
1889 during July. In August of 89, the workers reached the point located about 5 miles past Wild Rose and Half Moon Prairies. Again, signs that you will see still as you drive north. And then they identified it as a stop. And then in that, there was an abundance of deer roaming around in the forested park-like landscape, and thus came the name Deer Park.
Just because there was a lot of deer.
Boy, there's a lot of deer around here. It kind of feels like a park, guys. We should just call this Deer Park.
I love it.
Speaking of parks, there are several parks in the community of Deer Park.
Okay.
Most of them are named after former mayors. One of the largest one is called Mix Park, named after Earl D. Mix, the longest running mayor of Deer Park.
Okay.
And it is a quite good-sized park on the edge of town. They host a summer concert series. They have 7 concerts on Saturdays, 7 Saturdays in a row through the summertime.
That's cool.
It's also the home of an 18-hole golf course in Deer Park. We've sold several properties on the golf course over the years.
Beautiful golf course.
It is. And the reality is that area, I think, will continue to grow up as the 395, Highway 395 freeway connects to I-90.
This is something that I know is a little bit funny, but I'm always surprised when I find out that one of these little towns has its own airport. Like, there is a Deer Park airport.
Yeah, it's not much of one.
I know, but people with private planes who want to live on a golf course, they can do it. I know of some people who did that.
Did that? Who's drawn to this area? It's really, like, I wrote the words urban rural. Like, you're right outside of Spokane, but you're in rural. Many of the lots are 10-acre minimums or more.
Sure.
Hobby farmers, like people that really, like, there's a whole group of people that would be a life dream of theirs to be able to sell their house in LA County and buy a hobby farm in Deer Park, Washington, and, live off of your farm. And you really could do that, honestly, if you do it right. So that's kind of Deer Park. It's a cool community. I think you put together some numbers too, didn't you? On
Yes. Okay, sorry. I was so interested in history, I forgot that I'm doing the numbers. We switched jobs this week, folks. All right.
See if we keep these jobs. Probably not.
So we, when we do the numbers, we typically do 1 acre or less. And we decided, hey, since we're doing Deer Park, let's do 1 acre or more.
Let's see what the acreage looks like.
I would like to compare and contrast 1 acre and more versus 1 acre and less. So I'm going to do that. All right. So
would it be 1 acre or in fewer?
Fewer. That is 1 acre or less. No, 1 acre or less.
Oh man.
Nice try. All right.
I believe you can count the acres.
Okay, we're not having this grammar conversation right now. All right. So here we go. Active listings. Over an acre. That's what I'm just going to say. Over and under.
There you go.
Over an acre there are 93 active properties over an acre. And let me just say this, that it goes from 1 acre, the biggest piece is 2,536 acres, which is huge. However, just so you know, 78 of the 93 properties are under 100 acres. So they're not all humongous like that. So that compares to, so let's talk about the active listings, 183, less than an acre, under an acre. Okay, so active price range for over an acre is 105,000 to 13 million. That's a really big one out there.
It's a really big one on a lake.
Yeah. So, and then the active price range for under an acre is 70,000 to 3,995,000. So basically 4 million.
Sure.
Pending. So pending listings over an acre 127, under an acre 953. Median active list price over an acre is 825,000, and under an acre is 347,000. Yeah.
Again, you've got some big properties out there.
You do have some big properties out there. I just think that sometimes people think that there's, you're just buying like an acre here or there. But there's some very expensive and very nice properties that are over an acre. Let's see. Sold in the last 6 months, over an acre is 710 properties, and under an acre is 4,607 properties. So quite a big difference there.
Yeah, huge.
And then,
which is why we use the smaller, like when we're looking at the numbers every week, obviously we want the larger amount of,
yes.
Like we're looking at generally what people are buying and selling in the Spokane MLS.
That's correct. But there is a whole other world out there. Okay, so sold in the last 12 months, over an acre is 1,301 properties. Under an acre is 8,723 properties, not acres. Median sold price in the last 6 months for over an acre is $469,000. And then median sold price in the last 6 months for under an acre is $315,000. So, bottom line, you got supply and demand, and
yeah, a quick note. I'm sorry, active listings in our normal numbers 183. Last week we had 201. It's 7.5 days.
Yeah.
Of inventory. The reality is they get it depending on which day you pull, but we consistently pull on the same day every week. We're looking at it, and so. Yeah, no,
they're interesting numbers, and they're numbers that.
It is also February. Here's the deal: if you're thinking of selling your house, just put it on the market right now because there are no houses out there, and
you will do
supply and demand will work in your favor.
Absolutely.
What's going on in Spokane, Jess? Should we talk about it? There's not a ton, but guess what's happening? Valentine's Day is tomorrow.
Yes.
Which is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 2 in our road to recovery is happening in Eastern Washington on Monday. I did hear rumors on Twitter that the governor is letting restaurants move to Phase 2 a day early so they can take advantage of Valentine's Day on Sunday.
Okay.
And it truly is just a rumor on Twitter, but the mayor tweeted it, so I'm guessing it's probably accurate.
Probably so. But all right.
Don't quote me.
If you're a restaurateur, make sure you know the rules.
Let's see what else. There's just kind of a feeling of change and moving forward. We've got vaccines going. I heard an interview clip this morning from Dr. Fauci. I think it was on ABC News or something, that that the supply is such that by April, anybody that wants to have a vaccine can get their name signed up for a vaccine.
It's good news.
It still will take a few months to actually put them all in people's arms that want them. But the point being that there's kind of that feeling of...
I'm talking to a lot of people, my mom, my aunt, people that are close to that 65 and over age, and they're all getting their shots, and that's
my sister,
exciting.
I think, has had her second shot. She's a pharmacist, so she's on the front line. So it's happening. So as I was kind of seeing that and thinking that, other than that, there's really not much going on in Spokane.
That's the whole section.
There is a virtual symphony event, actually, on Valentine's Day. If you're listening to this and you don't know about it, it's too late. You had to register by the 10th, but it was a dinner and a show. Like, you could pick up a dinner at the Fox downtown and come back home, and then the symphony was going to play for whatever on Valentine's Day.
Cool.
It was a really cool idea.
Maybe some of you got in on that. That would be so great.
But there is the Bach Fest at the end of the month, also still virtual, but you can register online to watch the symphony play, I think, 4 different shows of Bach. Anyway.
That's cool.
I
didn't know that was happening.
As kind of things are progressing, I was thinking about, what has COVID done for us? And, as we end here, because we're pretty much at the point where we need to end, I think that we should not lose sight of the moments of kind of stillness, hopefully, that we had, and nothing to do. There was an article in the New York Times that I won't go into about the creativity that happens when we just stop.
And some of us, that will happen when our kids are out of the house.
So
I'm just saying.
That's around the corner, too. Anyway, with that, hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.